Hello, class. Welcome to the session of colonialism and to globalization. What is the crisis? I am Dr. MZCvdo. Welcome you in the class. No matter how we define ourselves, it is very important to realize that cultures have been interacting each other for centuries, even millennia. But there are some particularities for last 500 years how they have been interacting. These are the factors: commercial expansion, industrial capitalism, dominance of the colonial and core nations. Industrialization accelerated local participation in larger networks in the society. This expansionist tendency fueled the growth of European colonial empires during and after the 16th century. Colonialism is the political, social, economic, and cultural domination of a territory and its people by a foreign power for an extended time. The colonial power establishes and maintains a presence in the dominated territory in the form of colonist and administrative personnel. From another definition, we can also find this is an establishment and maintenance for an extended time of rule over an alien people from the perspective of the colonizers, that is separate and subordinate to the ruling power. So, as you can see, those who are intended to rule, they are already taking it that they are subordinate and alien. So, the establishment of domination of a geographically extended political unit, most often inhabited by people of a different race and culture, where this domination is political and economic, and the colony exists subordinate to and dependent on the mother country. However, we shouldn't be forgetting there is a sense of extortion and transfer of resources from the colonized country is also eminent. From another definition, colonialism is often defined as a system of government which seeks to defend an unequal system of commodity exchange. However, Edward Said's point is very valid, maintains that colonialism existed in order to impose the superiority of the European way of life on that of the Oriental, a colonization of minds and bodies as much as that of space and economies, and much harder to transcend or throw off. Thus, imperialism refers to a conscious policy of extending the rule of a country or an empire over foreign nations and of taking and holding foreign colonies. Imperialism goes back to early states, including Egypt in the Old World and the Incas in the New. A Greek empire was forged by the Alexander the Great, and Julius Caesar and his successors spread the Roman Empire. More recent examples include British, French, and Soviet empires. So, if imperialism is almost as old as the state, colonialism can be traced back to Phoenicians, who established colonies along the eastern Mediterranean 3000 years ago. The ancient Greeks and Romans are avid colonizers as well as empire builders. The above definition leads to discrepancies in the chronology of imperialism. For example, Marxist analysts believe that this monopoly stage of capitalism only began around the start of 20th century. So another more broadly reaching definition is both formal colonies and privileged positions in markets, protected sources of materials and extended opportunities for profitable employment of labor. The first phase of modern colonialism begin with the European age of discovery. On the other hand, those who are colonized, for them it is could be said as the age of slavery of the Americas and a sea route to the Far East. During the 16th century, Spain have conquered Mexico and Peru, Bolivia, explored and colonized widely in the Caribbean and the southern portions of that what was becoming United States and Central and South America. Interestingly enough, when we talk about America, we only think about United States. Why? There are many forms of colonialism, one of which we are quite familiar with is the mercantile capitalism. As you can see, Spanish and Portuguese colonialism spread all over the world, and how they have been spreading to both parts of America, it is very interesting to observe. The mercantile colonialism is based on plantation system and also forced labor. And the next slide will see how colonizer imposed a particular plantation on their behalf and for their benefit. So when trade links intensified, mercantile colonialism also expanded. By the mid 1700s, Europeans were trading with Asia and coastal Africa without settlement. In Asia, Europeans traded and resided in intermediary ports such as Macau. So, commercial expansion and European imperialism actually worked hand in hand. The drive for commercial expansion led to European imperialism in Africa, Asia, and Oceania. During the second half of the 19th century, European imperial expansion was aided by improved transportation, which facilitated the colonization of vast areas of sparsely settled lands in Australia and the interior of North and South America. The first phase of European colonialism had been the exploration and exploitation of the Americas and the Caribbean, and after Columbus. A second phase began as European nations competed with each other for colonies between 1875 and 1914. One key point is here we often get the idea that exploration is happening, but we often forget the other part of the story, how the colonized have been exploited. British colonialism highly connected with our history, our present condition, and the identity that we call us. So it first began with the Elizabethan voyages of the 16th century. During the 17th century, Britain acquired most of the eastern coast of North America, Canada's St. Lawrence Basin, islands in the Caribbean, slave stations in Africa, and interests in India. The American Revolution ended the first stage of British colonialism. India, Canada, and various Caribbean islands remained under British control. The second stage of British colonialism, the British Empire, on which the sun never set, roses from the ashes of the first, beginning in 1788 but intensifying after 1815. The British settled Australia. So Britain's colonial expansion continued during the Victorian era. Queen Victoria's Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli guided a foreign policy justified by a view of imperialism as shouldering the white man's burden, a phrase coined by the poet Rudyard Kipling. People in the empire were seen as incapable of governing themselves, so British guidance was needed to civilize and Christianize them. This parentalistic and racist doctrine was used to legitimize Britain's acquisition and control of parts of Central Africa and Asia. As you can see, we have read earlier, it is also highly ethnocentric, where Britain, assuming that their culture is high compared to others, have this legitimacy to rule over. Thus, the establishment of private companies, they were essentially granted large territories to administrate in Africa. The European powers provided charters for these companies. The companies took on the expenses of establishing and administering the colonies. A bonus for European countries, they had the influence but not the expense. And if you see the map, actually a white man, British South African company emblem established 1887 by Cecil Rhodes in South Central Africa. Under his two legs, the whole continent is colonized. In the form of direct rule, there were centralized administrations. They encouraged assimilations. Colonists were to civilize the indigenous people. Indigenous peoples often occupied subordinate positions in government. The divide and the rule policy was used. As you can see, the Senate Philippine bill offers great inducements to the bad Filipino. So the discourse of good Filipino, bad Filipino has been traced back to the story, the legacy of colonization is in itself. This system of governance used indigenous rulers within the colonial administration. However, they often had an inferior role, viewed as more cooperative model than direct rule. But does this necessarily reduces the power of control mechanism by the rulers? Think about it. So it is crucial to see that settler rule was also imposed. Settlers imposed direct rule, often very harsh policies. The objective was to colonize, the objective of permanent settlement. Security and prosperity for the settlers depended on economic exploitation and political oppression of the indigenous people. This is it for today. See you in the next one.